Hello there, Qckslvrslash, and today I have a review of the Tier 9 German battleship, the Friedrich der Große. It's been a while since I've done a review, and I felt it was kind of time since it's a new ship in my harbor, and I think I've finally come to grips with how to play her. So now's when I'm going to be reviewing it. So right off the bat, I was pretty excited to get this ship. I really loved the Bismarck, I enjoy the Tirpitz just as much, and I was expecting this ship to kind of just beat the Bismarck a tier later. A lot of secondaries, still only 8 barrels, a little bit bigger, a little more hit points, you know. I was just expecting, you know, this kind of natural progression. And I personally don't feel it's there. The Bismarck, to me, plays very differently than the de Groot, and I think a big part of it just comes down to size. You're such a big target in this ship, both width and lengthwise, that it ends up hurting you. And then further exasperating this is the two ships I've driven previously are the Iowa and the Izumo. So to then get into the de Groot, which, you know, doesn't face tank quite as well as either of these ships, it definitely made it hard for me the first couple games. I think after the first 3 games, my average damage was like 30,000. So that kind of tells you how much time I spent struggling in this. Now I've managed to claw that up, and about 20 games in, I think I'm just over 75,000, somewhere in there. Average damage, I haven't actually looked, but I know I've been having a lot more consistent games and games with higher damage now, and it just comes down to how you play her. So jumping in right away, just to compare the stats, survivability, 84,300, you know, the Izumo's 78,900, the Iowa's 79,000. So the de Groot, you think, is going to last in the fight a little longer. And, you know, like I was saying, I just don't feel it does. And part of that comes down to the armor layout. Yeah, you've got this great belt here, but there's so much superstructure when compared, you know, to the Izumo, who's got just this tiny tower and another 56 mils of belt armor. And then, you know, the Iowa, well, everyone knows the Iowa's pretty thin from the sides. Yeah, she's got a bunch more superstructure, but once you take that armor off, she's got a 300 thick Citadel belt. Whereas, you know, the de Groot, that's kind of part of it. It's right on the outside. There's not that additional little thickness of torpedo bulge. So I think that is part of what hurts her. She just takes a lot more consistent damage. And in the Tirpitz and Bismarck, you get away with a lot, and you just don't in this ship. Now moving on to the artillery, obviously once you upgrade it, you get these 420mm guns, which I've heard a lot of back and forth. My personal opinion, I like the 420s. The additional penetration that they offer, and just they seem to be doing more consistent damage for me. They definitely have more alpha. They come in 5,000 HE, 13,500 with the AP, 21.4 kilometer range with 800 meter per second velocity, and 276 dispersion at that 21.4. When you compare that to the 410s, the Izumo's guns are a little bit faster firing, a little bit better dispersion, and there's more of them, but you know, they don't punch quite as hard, and that's kind of that. They do have a little more HE damage though. And then when you compare it to the Iowa, well, you know, Iowa's a little worse on aim, a little better on range though, so at equal range they're probably pretty comparable, and her AP is slower while her HE is faster. So that kind of puts the de Groot, if you've played the other two ships, her shells fall somewhere in between. Now where the de Groot, or the de Große, sorry, I really mess up pronunciations on these things all the time. Where she comes into her own is these secondaries, 105 mil and 150. Now the captain's not equipped, but I do have all the modules, and I pretty much equipped all these ships identically. The one exception, I think the Iowa's got AA boost in rather than the secondaries. But these guns can do a whack of damage really quickly, and that's how I have built my de Große. Moving into AA, 71 rating, definitely respectable, kind of a little lower than the Izumos, but once again, these two ships I built for AA, and you know, the German AA is not great, but it's enough to help knock down. You're going to be relying on cruisers though. Maneuverability is definitely something that I personally feel hurts her, and it comes down to quickness. And I've used this term before, and I think people misinterpret it. When I say a ship is quick, I don't mean it's fast. I mean it maneuvers, it gets up to speed quickly, it slows down quickly, it's maneuverable. And to me, quick is a word to describe agility, and she is not a quick ship. She's faster, but when you look at the turning circle and rudder shift, she rounds up the bottom by 20 meters and, you know, over 50 meters worse. And I've got the rudder shift mod in this thing. It's a rough ship to get by. Now, granted, the rudder shift in the Izumo is worse, but something about her just feels a little more controllable. This thing is big, and it makes dodging torpedoes difficult even with that hydro. And then concealment, what's there to say? It's a battleship. Everything's going to see you from across the map after you've fired, so that doesn't really matter too much. Now, as far as module setup, pretty standard in my mind. So I've gone with main armament 1, really just to make sure all my guns keep working. We only have 8 barrels and, you know, 4 facing forward if you're kind of in that kind of fight. You can't really afford to lose one, and it helps all your secondaries and everything as well. In slot 2, I've gone with secondary battery modification because combined with the commander skills, it projects those secondaries a long way. In my third slot, I've got gunfire control 2. This increases the range, but because the dispersion cone and the range don't increase linearly, it means it actually helps your aim out a bit as far as things go, and you can definitely use it. Damage control 1 in the 4th slot because it's pretty much what I run on everything. I've gone with rudder shift to help her out, and then I've put in target acquisition just to help make sure I see those torpedoes nice and early, give me a chance to dodge them. Now, as far as the commander, and this is where things I think get interesting because this new tree really changes things up. You can see it's only a 17 pointer in here, and I may end up changing things up once he's at a full 19 point captain. But for now, at tier 1 I've got preventative maintenance just to keep all my modules functioning. I've gone with expert marksman. I really feel this skill is pretty necessary in most battleships. Helps speed your turrets up, and it's not like smokescreen expert's going to help you. And ultimately, maybe adrenaline rush. All types of armament, you know, secondary batteries, you could basically have those up to full machine gun status when you're low on health. At tier 3, well, you know, a lot of people like to take survivability expert. I don't. Battleships have plenty of health. You don't really need it. So I've gone with superintendent to recover health because combined with the dreadnought flag, you can keep the ship in the battle far longer than those hit points ever will. And I've gone with basic fire training. And then at tier 4, well, advanced fire training and manual secondaries because the manual secondaries are just hilarious on this ship. And you'd be surprised how quickly they knock down destroyers and cruisers that get in close to you. And then if you're against another battleship, there's always that fire chance. So maybe as I get these 2 more points, I'll dump them into Adrenaline Rush just to see how that affects the secondaries as I start to get low on hit points. Not so much as a serious build, more just for fun. And long range, who knows what I'll do, but that can always come in a later video. So let's hop into a battle and see how she performs. So here we are, starting off a battle, domination mode on neighbors, and it's a tier 9 battle, which means I'm a big ship. And that's always nice to be in any class of ships, but in battleships, it definitely makes you kind of the bully. And you've got to play that way, I find, and it plays perfectly to the Friedrich der Große's playstyle. She's a great brawling ship, really strong if you get in close, And a map like Neighbors is going to let me do that. I'm going to head over to Charlie and use the islands to pick and choose who has firing solutions on me and who I get to shoot at, and hopefully can help my team win this one. And that's kind of the mindset I just go into a game with, is I'm just going to try to do the best I can and try to help my team win. And if you can do that and you play well, your team has really good odds of winning. Now, of course, occasionally you get the odd, just absolute dunce of a team where half your team's dead before 5 minutes has even elapsed. But that's going to happen because sometimes you're on the flip side and half the enemy team's dead before you've fired a shell. So ultimately, you really do impact the outcome of the game, and at least that's the mindset I've always taken. So one of the big things I'm definitely going to pay attention to throughout this battle is I can't let my position become stagnant. Because I'm the tier 9 battleship, things are going to rely on me to do a lot of the pushing. A tier 8 or tier 7 battleship that may be involved, okay, just a couple tier 8s, they're not going to want to push up. They might. Maybe they've got a really aggressive captain, but for the most part, I kind of expect them to want to sit a little further back because the threat of a Friedrich der Große or Iowa on the other team is high enough that they're going to be concerned. So I've got a York lined up, I fire the guns, and these ones are going to land true. I feel a little bad for that York, just off the start line, and bam, Citadel. 14,850 damage, 1 Citadel, 1 over penetrating hit. And that's one of the reasons I've chosen these 420s. I know there's some discussion, at least on the Grosser Kurfürst. The 406s, I think, technically have better pen in a short range around 10 kilometers. But for me, I'm going to go with the Alpha. More consistent penetration at all ranges, and the rate of fire doesn't really change much. Pick up another 6,000 on my doppelganger there. Wish it had been a little more, but I either aimed high or he turned a little in. Most of the shells seemed to kind of hit his superstructure. And one of the things in a battleship, you have to make your shots count. And something I've been doing a lot better of late is picking targets, picking who is most flat on. And, by doing that, you're going to do more damage. Sure, there's a time to focus down a target, and unfortunately that entire volley missed, but early start of a game like this, if you can land a couple big hits at the targets giving you, that juicy side profile, it's really going to help. So you notice right here, I'm slowing up. I don't want to obscure my guns behind this island before getting the shot off at the Bismarck. All the shells clear and right back to full throttle because, this game's turning into Ring Around the Rosie. Almost our entire team went to Charlie. Their entire team went to Alpha. It's going to be a little unfortunate for the destroyer that went to Bravo and the cruiser that went over to Alpha and our carrier. And, carrier captains, please don't just have a set position in mind. I go behind this island and sit there. Take a look where your team's going and, move. Be active. With all of us here, you're going to be completely safe here. I have a feeling at the start of the battle, they were facing off that direction and they just kind of have in their mind, this is the place I go to. So, you're going to get yourself in trouble if you just go hide behind the exact same island on every map without looking at the situation. And that's definitely something I'm paying attention to right now. What is the situation? We're down 2 ships to none. Our entire team is pushing through Charlie. Ideally, I would like to slow up. I'd love to just kind of sit, take shots at some of these side-on targets. But if I stop here, you can guarantee pretty much every ship is stopping with me. Some may push on, but for the most part, I'm leading the charge here. And as long as all these ships move up with me, it's going to be okay. And that's one of those things that, you know, takes a bit of work, is the concerted push. If a team pushes as a whole, it's going to go a heck of a lot better than if you push one by one. And the dream being on an enemy team is one ship coming in, second he's dead, the next one shows up, then the next. You're going to get tons of damage, lots of kills, without taking much because you never get focused on. So what I'm thinking right now is I want my secondaries on a target. 10.5 kilometers is the cutoff for mine with the captain and the modules as I described, and I really would like to get them just doing some of that harassing damage. It adds up over time. It's not going to be a huge alpha strike like the main batteries, but if they can fire for a long enough duration, they're going to get a good chunk of damage themselves. So I take a shot with my main batteries at this Gneiss now, and lock my secondaries on, and there they go. Now here is the first time I check my speed, and the reason is, if you take a look around me, you know, I've got the North Carolina, the Bismarck. I don't want to be sticking out. I just want to make sure that we're keeping our momentum. So I've slowed up. I'm just trying to let everything kind of catch up to me so that I'm not too alone, and then I'll get underway again. I line that poor York up again, who I citadeled to start the game, and, well, it's only going to take another overpen and a second citadel to finish him, get my first kill, and I'm up to 70,000 damage, coming up on 8 minutes into this game. So now the other two battleships have caught up to me. Once again, full throttle ahead. I don't want them stopping because then we're all sitting ducks. I just didn't want to be the kind of sore thumb. So I try to line this Edinburgh up. I kind of messed this shot up, and you'll see. They all kind of go a little high. I think I misinterpreted his angle a bit and the angle of the island. Still get a few thousand damage though. And now I'm thinking about trying to close something again. My secondaries aren't firing. I'm kind of outside that super effective range of my main guns. You know, I've said it many times, I like to be inside 10k. It doesn't matter if I'm in a battleship, cruiser, destroyer, that's just the range I want. And that Edinburgh gets deleted by our North Carolina, so he's no longer a threat. And part of me thinks he doesn't run smoke, because if I were him, I would have sat right where that Bismarck is on the enemy team and just sat in smoke and shot and racked up damage. So here we go. I've got an inside secondary range, main battery's firing, nose on Iowa. Not the greatest target, but it's kind of what I had there. Maybe I could have looked around a little more. In my mind, these two ships off to the north don't really matter. What I'm concerned about is we've got 6 of us right here. There's 4 of them there, with that North Carolina and cruiser kind of busy with our battleship up to the north. So I really want to push in. And here I go for kind of a cheeky shot, thinking that Bismarck's coming around the corner. He is. I just don't land anything big. 4,400 damage. And once again, I've gotten a little far ahead, so I'm slowing up on the speed. And I'm just letting those secondaries work on that Iowa until he disappears behind the edge of land. Then I'll switch him over to the next target. In this case, I believe I do pick the Bismarck right as she starts to back up and get the main batteries off. These are looking a little better, but still only 4,300. None dipped low enough to really strike any important parts of the ship. And then I noticed that their Friedrich der Große has finally come up in speed and they've turned. They're running for behind that islands. Their team looks to be trying to make a final stand kind of behind here as a group. We really don't want to let him get there. The secondaries are firing away. Looks like he doesn't have the secondary build because his aren't firing back until much closer. I pick up the kill on him, that one main battery shell, and, well, unfortunately, this is kind of where things start to go downhill for me. Our team is spread out. We're no longer that united kind of hammer punching through the enemy team. Probably turn a little wide here. Try to get shots onto that Iowa. 2 over-penetrating hits. He slows up. I aim again. The secondaries are going, but only another 1,300 damage, and the torpedo planes are coming. So I'm definitely in danger here. You know, in my setup at least, I don't have the greatest AA rating, only 71. Granted, it's a tier 8 carrier, but he's still going to get some torpedoes through. I've got that fighter plane in the air. It gets shot down. And I'm full brakes, full rudder over, but as I've said before, the ship, you know, she's not agile. I eat 3 torpedoes. I've already got the repair going. I'm just trying to get, every shell off that I can. And I do have a fire going, so I'm building up a little more damage. Just continuing to tick on that Iowa. Part of me wishes the team wouldn't shoot at him, so my damage would go a little higher, but at this point things are looking pretty good for the team. But this one isn't so much about the game. It's gonna work out. The Iowa's gonna sink, and the team's gonna come together and hunt down the few remaining ships. So let's jump to the post battle. In the end, I thought it was a pretty decent example of what you can expect when you drive the Friedrich der Große. And you're a big target, so a lot of things are going to choose to shoot at you. Whether you're bow in or side on or angled, they're going to be hitting your citadel, and the shells are going to be landing on your decks. And because your belt armor is maybe just a little bit thinner, cumulatively, shells just seem to go through. And I think part of why I had a hard time in the ship is you see 10s so much more often than you do in 8s. Sure, in an 8 you can still see a 10, but you can also see a 6. Whereas in the 9, you're consistently going to be seeing higher, collectively higher average tiers. And then the ship is a little rough off the start. You really do need the upgraded hull and the 420s in my opinion. Anyways, in this game I got 350,000 credits, 6,800 experience, just about 125,000 damage, and only 41 main battery hits and 99 secondaries. I was a little mean to that York with those citadels, but that's what big heavy battleship shells are going to do to a cruiser. And in the end, only 2 kills, but I felt like I progressively led the charge throughout that, and as a result, wound up second on my team. 1630 experience, not astounding, like not great. Kind of my benchmark is 2000 and above is typically a really good game. But 1630, definitely respectable, happy with that, and happy with the win. If I had slowed up or sat back, I really think my team would have kind of just sat on their haunches and just waited. So I decided to keep pushing forward, and I took the damage for it, but we won the game. And when you look at my spread of damage, 26,000 to the York, that was really 2 volleys that actually connected with him, mostly citadels. Their Friedrich der Große, 15,000, Iowa, 37,000, Bismarck, almost 30,000, and then, some rounding damage on a couple other things. And all told, when you look at it, main batteries accounted for most of that damage. With the secondaries and the fires, they lit, almost adding up to 30,000 damage. And that's part of the reason I like these secondaries. And given more soft targets within range, which really never happened this battle, it was really just BBs they got to shoot at. If you have a lot of cruisers that they're getting to shoot at, you're going to see a lot more just actual damage on top of the fires they're going to light. And, well, end of the day, it is a tier 9, so I only made 100,000 after service and all those consumables, but 6,800 towards the goal of finishing it, and 8,100 towards the captain, who still working his way to 19 points. Anyways, I hope you guys found this informative. I know the Friedrich der Große has been around for a while. though the patch just changed, so maybe some are interested in the captain skills I've chosen, or just how she plays, because I know a lot of people haven't gone up all the lines. If you did enjoy this, consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing to the channel, and as always, I'm Qckslvrslash, and I'll have another one for you guys later.